The lawyer's voice droned through the cramped office as he read grandfather's will aloud. My cousins shifted in their chairs, barely containing their excitement. I sat frozen, waiting for my name. It never came. "And that concludes the last will and testament of William Henderson," the lawyer announced, closing the folder with a definitive snap. My heart hammered against my ribs. 40 years I'd worked that farm alongside Grandpa. 40 years of sunrise milkings, hay harvests, and mending fences. 40 years of believing I was his chosen successor. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice cracking. "There must be some mistake. What about the farm?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses, consulting his notes. "The Henderson farm goes to your cousin Marcus, along with all agricultural equipment and livestock." Marcus avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by his shoes. Sarah, my other cousin, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "But I've been running that place since I was 16, I protested. "Grandpa always said—" "I'm sorry, but the will is quite clear," the lawyer interrupted. "You receive nothing." The words hit like a physical blow. Nothing. After dedicating my entire adult life to preserving our family legacy, I was being erased from it completely. I stumbled out of that office feeling like a ghost. The September air felt thin, insufficient. My pickup truck sat in the parking lot like a faithful dog, still carrying the scent of hay and motor oil from this morning's work. Work on a farm that was no longer mine. As I drove past the familiar fields, a terrible thought crystallized. What if Grandpa had discovered something about me, something that made him believe I didn't deserve our family's most precious inheritance? I had no idea how right I was. 3 months later, I was stocking shelves at the hardware store when Marcus burst through the door, his face pale as winter wheat. "The bank's foreclosing," he gasped, waving a legal document. "They're taking the farm." I set down the box of screws I'd been organizing, my hands suddenly unsteady. "What do you mean, foreclosing?" Grandpa had debts, massive debts. The lawyer said the farm was worth enough to cover them, but Marcus slumped against the counter. The cattle market crashed. The equipment's older than dirt. The bank says we owe more than it's all worth. A strange mixture of vindication and grief washed over me. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied. If I couldn't have the farm, at least Marcus wouldn't either. But the larger part, the part that had loved that land since childhood, felt sick. "How long do you have?" I asked. 30 days. The auction's set for October 15th. That night, I lay awake calculating. My savings from 20 years of careful living. The small inheritance from my mother. The equity in my modest house. It might be enough. The idea was insane. Buy back the farm that had rejected me? But as I stared at the ceiling, I realized something profound. My love for that land wasn't conditional on ownership or inheritance. It was deeper than blood, deeper than family politics. I'd spent 3 months feeling sorry for myself, but maybe this was my chance. Not to prove anything to a dead man or ungrateful cousins, but to save the place that had shaped me. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would bid on the Henderson farm at foreclosure. I just had no idea what I was really buying. October 15th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day Grandpa would have called perfect for harvest. I arrived at the farm early, wanting to walk the property one last time before the auction. The old farmhouse looked tired, its white paint peeling like sunburned skin. The barn's red had faded to rust brown, and several shingles hung loose from the roof. But the bones were good, the foundation solid, the land itself unchanged. I found myself standing in the doorway of the machine shed where Grandpa had taught me to change oil and replace spark plugs. The smell of motor oil and old hay still lingered, mixed with something else, something musty and forgotten. By 10 o'clock, a small crowd had gathered. A few neighboring farmers, some antique dealers hoping for equipment bargains, and a developer from the county seat who kept measuring distances with his eyes. The auctioneer, a weathered man named Pete Kowalski, climbed onto the porch steps. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to auction the Henderson Farm. 160 acres of prime agricultural land, plus buildings and remaining equipment. My palms were sweating despite the cool air. I'd qualified for a loan, but just barely. This was my one shot. We'll start the bidding at $50,000. Several hands went up immediately. The developer bid aggressively, driving the price higher. My heart sank as the numbers climbed past my comfort zone. 75,000. Do I hear 80? This was it. I raised my hand, my voice somehow steady. 80,000. The developer glanced at me dismissively and bid 85. We went back and forth until he finally shook his head at 92,000. Sold to the gentleman in the John Deere cap for $92,000. I'd done it. I owned the Henderson Farm. The keys felt foreign in my hand as I unlocked the farmhouse door for the first time as owner. The hinges creaked in protest and stale air rushed out like a held breath finally released. Inside, everything remained exactly as Grandpa had left it. Marcus and Sarah had taken only personal items, photographs, jewelry, Grandma's china. The furniture, books, and decades of accumulated farm records remained untouched. I walked through rooms that held 40 years of memories. The kitchen where Grandma had taught me to make biscuits. The living room where Grandpa and I had watched weather reports and commodity prices. My old bedroom upstairs, unchanged since I'd moved out at 18. But something felt different now. As the owner rather than the grandson, I noticed details I'd overlooked before. The way certain floorboards sagged, the water stains on the ceiling that suggested roof problems, the outdated electrical system that probably violated half a dozen codes. In Grandpa's study, I found boxes of farm records dating back decades. Tax returns, equipment purchases, veterinary bills, the paper trail of a working farm. I'd need to understand the financial situation I'd inherited along with the land. That's when I found the first anomaly. Buried in a 1987 tax return was a payment to something called Midwest Geological Survey for $12,000. I'd never heard Grandpa mention any geological survey. Why would a cattle and grain farmer need geological work? I made a note to investigate and continued unpacking. But as I carried my clothes upstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me, waiting for me to discover something. The floorboard in my old bedroom creaked differently than I remembered. When I knelt to examine it, I realized it was loose, very loose. The loose floorboard lifted easily, revealing a gap just wide enough for my hand. My fingers touched something hard and rectangular, a metal box, wedged between the joists. I pulled it free, my heart racing. The box was old, its green paint chipped and faded. A small padlock secured the latch, but years of moisture had corroded the metal. It broke apart with minimal pressure. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were documents, old documents. The first was a geological survey report dated 1987, the same year as that mysterious payment I'd found. My hands trembled as I read the summary. Significant mineral deposits detected. Estimated value, $2.3 million. Recommend immediate extraction rights negotiation. $2.3 million under our farm. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the letter beneath it, written in Grandpa's careful handwriting. William Jr., if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've found what I hoped you'd never need to find. The mineral rights were sold in 1988 to pay for your father's medical bills. The cancer treatments we never told you about. He made me promise to keep it secret. Said he didn't want pity. The mining company has been patient, but they'll come eventually. When they do, remember, family protects family, even when it costs everything, especially then. Your grandfather. My father had died in a car accident when I was 8. At least that's what I'd always been told. I sank onto my old bed, the letter shaking in my hands. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my father's death, about Grandpa's financial struggles, it was all a lie. But if the mineral rights were sold decades ago, why was I left out of the will? The answer was in the final document. The mining contract was thick, full of legal language I barely understood. But the key details were clear enough. Midwest Mining Corporation had purchased extraction rights to all subsurface minerals on the Henderson farm for $400,000 in 1988. The contract included a clause that made my blood run cold. Surface rights holder maintains ownership of land, but must provide reasonable access for extraction operations. Mining to commence no later than 35 years from contract date. 35 years from 1988. That was 2023. This year. I flipped through the pages, looking for more details. The contract specified that the mining company would pay additional compensation for surface damage, but the amounts were laughably small compared to the disruption they could cause. Then I found the amendment, dated just 6 months before Grandpa's death. In shaky handwriting, he'd added a note. Mineral extraction to be delayed indefinitely pending resolution of surface ownership disputes. Surface ownership disputes. Grandpa had been fighting to protect the farm, even from the grave. But there was more. Clipped to the back of the contract was a letter from Midwest Mining, dated 2 weeks after Grandpa's funeral. Mr. Henderson, we understand William Henderson Sr. has passed. Our records show the farm has been inherited by Marcus Henderson. Please contact our office immediately to discuss commencement of extraction operations. Time is of the essence. Now I understood. Grandpa hadn't left me the farm because he was protecting me from this burden. He'd given it to Marcus, hoping my cousin would be strong enough to fight the mining company. But Marcus had failed. The foreclosure had played right into Midwest Mining's hands, except now I owned the farm, and I had no intention of letting them destroy it. The war for Henderson Farm was about to begin. They came on a Tuesday morning. 3 men in expensive suits driving a black SUV that looked out of place on our gravel road. I watched from the kitchen window as they parked near the barn and began taking photographs. I walked out to meet them, my grandfather's contract tucked in my jacket pocket. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The tallest one, a man with silver hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Robert Carlyle, legal counsel for Midwest Mining Corporation. You must be the new owner." "That's right. And you're trespassing." Carlyle smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, we have legal right to access this property. I assume you found the mineral rights contract by now?" My poker face must have slipped because his smile widened. "Mr. Henderson, let me be direct. This farm sits on top of one of the largest limestone deposits in the state. We've been patient. Far more patient than the contract required. But our patience has limits." "What exactly are you proposing?" "Full-scale quarry operations. We'll compensate you fairly for surface damage, of course. You can even keep farming around the edges." I looked across the fields where I'd spent my childhood, imagining them carved into a massive pit. "And if I refuse?" "The mineral rights are ours, legally purchased and properly recorded. You can cooperate and profit, or you can fight us and lose everything anyway." The second man, younger and nervous, spoke up. "The county's already approved our permits. We start preliminary work next month." After they left, I sat on the porch steps where Grandpa used to shell peas and watch the sunset. The land stretched before me, peaceful and whole. Soon it would be torn apart, unless I could find a way to stop them. That's when I remembered the Geological Survey's date discrepancy. I drove to the county courthouse the next morning, armed with copies of every document I'd found. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Dorothy, had worked there for 30 years and knew every property dispute in the county. "I need to see the original mineral rights filing for the Henderson farm," I told her. She disappeared into the basement archives and returned with a thick folder. "Here's everything we have, filed in 1988, just like you said." But as I examined the documents, something didn't add up. The Geological Survey was dated March 1987, but the mineral rights sale was recorded in January 1988. The survey that justified the sale had been conducted nearly a year later. Dorothy, is there any way to verify when this geological survey was actually performed? She adjusted her reading glasses. Well, geological surveys require permits from the State Environmental Office. Those records would be in the state capitol. I spent the afternoon on the phone with state bureaucrats, finally reaching a helpful clerk who agreed to fax me the permit records. What I discovered made my hands shake. The permit for geological survey of the Henderson farm was dated April 1988, 3 months after the mineral rights sale. They'd sold rights to minerals they hadn't even confirmed existed yet. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The real revelation was in the survey company's incorporation records. Midwest Geological Survey had been founded in 1987 by 3 partners, Robert Carlyle, Marcus Henderson, and William Henderson Sr. My grandfather and cousin had been partners with the mining company all along. The mineral rights sale wasn't a desperate move to pay medical bills. It was a planned conspiracy to defraud the property of its true value. And somehow my father's death was connected to it all. I finally understood why I'd been left out of the will. I found the real story in Grandpa's personal papers, hidden in a coffee can behind the water heater. A journal, written in his careful script, documenting everything. March 15, 1987. Billy found out about the mineral survey today. He's furious, says we're destroying the family legacy for money, threatened to go to the authorities. Marcus thinks we can convince him, but I know my son. He won't be bought. March 22, 1987. Billy's hired a lawyer. Says the geological survey was conducted without proper landowner consent. He's right, but it's too late to back out now. Carlyle says we're all in this together, sink or swim. April 3rd, 1987. Terrible argument with Billy tonight. He says he'll expose everything unless we cancel the mining deal. Called me a thief and a liar. Maybe he's right. But Marcus has gambling debts, and I need the money for the farm improvements. We're too deep in now. April 8th, 1987, Billy's dead. Car accident on Highway 34, they say. Brake failure. I know better. Carlyle said he'd handle the problem, but I never thought, God forgive me, I never thought he meant murder. The journal fell from my hands. My father hadn't died in an accident. He'd been killed to protect a conspiracy that included his own father and brother. The final entries were even more damning. I can't live with what we've done, but if I confess, Marcus goes to prison too, so I'll carry this secret to my grave. The boy must never know. Better he thinks his father died a hero than learn his grandfather is a murderer. Now I understood everything. Grandpa left me out of the will because he knew I'd eventually discover the truth. He was protecting me from becoming another victim of Carlyle's greed. But his protection had failed. I called Carlyle and arranged to meet at the farm the next morning. This time, I was ready. He arrived alone, confident and smiling. I trust you've had time to reconsider our offer, Mr. Henderson? I have. But first, I want to show you something. I led him to the machine shed and pulled out Grandpa's journal. His face went pale as I read the entries aloud. That's just the ramblings of a guilty old man, he stammered. You can't prove anything. Maybe not murder, but I can prove fraud. I showed him the geological survey dates. You sold mineral rights based on a survey that hadn't been conducted yet. That's fraud, Mr. Carlyle, and fraud has no statute of limitations. His composure cracked. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Your cousin owed dangerous people money. Your grandfather was facing bankruptcy. We were trying to save everyone. By killing my father? That was an accident. We just wanted to scare him, make him back down. The brake line was only supposed to... He stopped, realizing what he'd just admitted. I'd been recording everything on my phone. It's over, Carlyle. I'm taking this to the police and I'm filing suit to void the mineral rights contract based on fraud. He lunged at me, but 40 years of farm work had kept me strong. I pinned him against the workbench until he stopped struggling. "You can't win," he gasped. "Even if you void the contract, you'll spend everything you have on legal fees." Maybe. But this farm will still be here when I'm done, and that's all that matters. I called the sheriff and waited for justice to finally arrive at the Henderson farm. 6 months later, I stood in the same machine shed where I'd confronted Carlisle. But everything had changed. The space was clean and organized, filled with new equipment purchased with the settlement money from Midwest Mining Corporation. The legal battle had been shorter than expected. Faced with evidence of fraud and a recorded confession to murder, the mining company had agreed to void the mineral rights contract and pay substantial damages. Carlisle was serving 15 years for conspiracy and manslaughter. Marcus had cooperated with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd revealed the full scope of the conspiracy, including how the gambling debts had been fabricated to justify the mineral rights sale. He was serving 2 years and had signed over any claim to the farm. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to keep me from inheriting the farm, Grandpa had ensured I'd eventually own it free and clear, with enough money to modernize and expand. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was standing in my father's memory, knowing the truth at last. He hadn't died in a random accident. He'd died defending the principles I now lived by, that some things are worth more than money, that family land is a sacred trust. I'd installed a memorial bench near the old oak tree where Dad used to sit and watch the sunset. The plaque read, "William Henderson, Jr. He died protecting what he loved." Every evening I sat on that bench and planned the farm's future, sustainable agriculture, maybe some agritourism, ways to honor the land while making it profitable. The Henderson farm would survive another generation. And someday, when I had children of my own, they'd know the whole truth about their heritage, the good and the bad, the heroes and the villains. Because family protects family, even when it costs everything.